writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery as technology alters the shape of the publishing industry. Searching for Answers is a group of writers throwing pop culture, writing, and publishing into a crucible of clarity, passion, and humor. This group is the Right Pack. In this episode of Right Pack Radio, the Right Pack is going to celebrate Dorothy L. Sayers and ask the question, can popular fiction be more than just popular fiction? Stay tuned. Welcome back to Right Pack Radio. This is your host and producer, David Allen Lucas, author of Crazy Things, president of St. Louis Writers Guild, president of Winding Trails Media. And, by the way, in October, which I know this is airing, not October, wow, am I gone?
Want to start over?
No, I don't. In June, in just a couple of weeks from when this is airing, is GatewayCon, the Gateway to Publishing Conference and Convention, with a book fair, a writers' conference, and a writers' retreat. You can still register for it right now. You don't want to miss out, but things are going fast. You will get to see various members of the Right Pack there, including myself, which I know that doesn't excite you, but you will be able to see the Madame of Murder herself, Fedora Ames. You will be able to see Kathleen KMB, and she's actually giving a Amherst
Writers and Artists writing workshop.
Thank you. You'll be able to see Brad R. Cook going completely crazy with me as we're running the thing. But Brad, you're also doing a thing on pitching and anything else?
No, pitching.
Okay. And Jen will be there as well. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll have a table. You'll probably see me selling.
You'll see her selling.
She'll be slanging books.
Yes.
Slanging books. And I swear at this moment that there will be the second Dog Park book out by then.
Yes.
I intended for it to be out by now. But I took 2 weeks to go to Europe and nothing happened while I was there. So,
right.
By then, by GatewayCon, it'll be Dog Park 2.
Yes, and running around will be Melanie and Chanel. They'll be in the background somewhere and helping me run the thing with Brad. So, come to GatewayCon. And by the way, if you can't make it, I want to go ahead and announce this now. You can register for free. I repeat, free. Tickets online to attend Right Pack Live. We will be live at GatewayCon, and we will be having a live audience not only in front of us, but online. There are only 100 places, and at this time, I'm just now opening it up. So, go quickly. And with that, let me turn this over to my one and only fabulous co-host.
Hello, I'm Kathleen George. I write speculative fiction and romance, primarily queer romance. And I have a story that is in a book, and I have an essay that is in a book. You can find the short story The Fairy Tree in the Best Science Fiction Fantasy of the Year, Volume 12, edited by Jonathan Strahan. And you can find my essay on Octavia Butler's impact on my life in Luminescent Threads, Connections to Octavia E. Butler, which has been nominated for a Hugo.
Excellent. Wow. Congratulations. And I need to do an errata on myself here. I left out that George Saroyan will be at GatewayCon, and so will Ryan P. Freeman. My apologies, both of you. Don't beat me up later. Okay, and also with us today is...
Hi, my name is Chanel Aitchen. I write all sorts of things, mainly speculative fiction and literary fiction is something I'm dabbling in. I am officially going to be going to my grad program in creative writing, so the MFA, it's official.
Hooray!
It's happening.
Congrats.
I will be there in August.
Yes.
We'll miss you.
We will miss you, but of course that does not mean that you can miss the Right Pack, because we do hold some of our panelists virtually. Hint, hint, hint.
Yes, we shall be one of those MFA people. We'll be,
we'll be beneath her.
Oh, come on!
Our writing abilities will pale in comparison to yours.
I can feel your elevated class from here.
Exactly.
And I'm going to leave it a little bit. Also with us today is the Sky Commodore Pirate, whatever, of steampunk himself.
I'll take it. Yes, I am Brad R. Cook. I am the author of the Iron Chronicles, the Airdranium Adventures, and Tales of the Gear Blade. You can find all of those at bradrarcook.com. But if, to all the writers out there, you need a book cover, you need your print book laid out, you need a website, do stop by the Writers Services page at bradrarcook.com or at broadswordbooks.blogspot.com.
And also with us is my lovely wife.
Hi, I'm Melanie Lucas, and I actually got some writing done this week.
Hooray!
And I would like to point out, he may be closing the gap. I am not sure yet because he has this tendency to throw away what he's done and start over again. But I am still ahead in our contest to finish the first drafts.
Okay, yes,
Yeah.
I was leaving my announcement there alone. So just say, yes, as of when we're recording this, I have finally completed. It's only a plot, people. It's only a plot, rough plot, but it's 7 pages just of a plot, and I'm getting ready to go into the next phase, which basically there's 4 phases to the process before you even get to write it. But this has been a better story so far than what I've tried to write.
I really like turning this into a race
I
between the two of you.
Why is
I
that?
want regular updates.
I was going to say, we need to get more regular updates.
Okay. Well,
We need stats.
I will go ahead and
Some
announce
sort of board where
Yeah,
there's,
can
you
we
know,
have
okay,
like
a
a
leaderboard.
to borrow from Brad for your log lines. You know how he's always saying that you need to be able to compare books. Well, I'm going to compare movies. It's just easier because I don't know what books everybody's read. So this is Veronica Mars meets Jason Bourne, held in The Fugitive. And with that, speaking of The Fugitive, let me turn this over to the Madame of Murder herself.
Who's not a fugitive.
She's not a fugitive, but mystery, you know.
I'm Fedora Amos. I write Victorian whodunits like Jack the Ripper in St. Louis and Mayhem at Buffalo Bill's Wild West. It's soon to come to fruition. Have your ticket punched by Frank James. I'm also president of Greater St. Louis Sisters in Crime, and I'm going to be doing a workshop, which is part 2 of I Love a Mystery. We call it New Tricks for Mystery.
New Tricks for Mysteries, all right.
I didn't know if it was going to be like a play on the title of the last one. So instead of I Love a Mystery, it's You Love Mystery. Or We Love a Mystery.
Or why to, anyway.
Yeah.
Now you love
And
mysteries.
also with us is
I like it.
the maestro of the illustration, of the online illustration.
Maestro, huh?
Yeah, well,
My name is Jennifer Stolzer. I'm a children's book author and illustrator. You can find more about me at jenniferstolzer.com. Brad said that he has services available. I'm an illustrator. My services are also available. There is no crime in hiring us both at the same time. My picture books and fantasy novel are available on Amazon and at Main Street Books in St. Charles, Missouri, which if you want to get a signed copy, go through them, because all copies they hold are signed by me.
excellent. And also with us today is the soon to no longer be president of Missouri Writers Guild, but the voice that will bring your books to life himself.
Yes.
George
yes,
Saroyan.
hello. This is George Saroyan. By this time, yes, former president of the Missouri Writers Guild. Definitely.
What did you do, George?
I've had a wonderful time as president, but yeah, one term is good right now. I'm also an author of science fiction for the young adult reader, including the first 2 books. That's right, you heard me. The first 2 books of the Excelsior Journey, which is Excelsior and its first sequel, Ever Upward. Both are available on ebook and by this point paperback. And I am also the author of the 5-part serial From Parts Unknown. You can find all that and more information on my website, which is www.he'sgotit.com. And I will see you at PenCon.
Excellent. And PenCon is in September here in St. Louis.
Oh, and GatewayCon.
And GatewayCon, yes. You will be there.
Yes.
Or otherwise I'm kidnapping you, and then I'm still bringing you there.
Oh, I'm there.
All right. Here, as I opened up the show earlier, today's topic is, we're first off celebrating Dorothy L. Sayers' We'll talk a little bit about her, who she was, why she's important, but also something that she ran into. And I admit, I didn't know that much about Dorothy until I read this. And in today's world, I'm a little bit surprised, a little fascinated by the controversy that she ended up having, which was a controversy about her fiction supposedly, pretensely trying to be more than mystery. And I'm using the terms that her critics used by saying by being pretential in that aspect. So let's talk about Dorothy first. And I know, Adora, you got some stuff ready, so let's go for it.
I would love to do that, but Brad usually gives us all the basics first. So are you ready, Brad? Do your thing.
Well, I mean, other than she was born in 1893 in Oxford, England, and then died in 1957 in England. As David pointed out, she was a poet and an author and a playwright. She did have her basic success with her mystery series. However, to her biggest success was the translation that she did of Dante's Divine Comedy. So that's what she considered to be her best work. Go Faye.
Can I just go ahead and say that she might actually have been pretentious?
She might have been.
As her critics accused her of not knowing the woman personally. Just that tiny little fact.
Well, her father did start teaching her Latin at age 6.
She was one of the first women to actually get a university education at Oxford.
Yep.
And so that is pretty impressive, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
And in those days, in general, those kinds of degrees would be centered around things like learning Latin, for example, and the great classics. And so no wonder she was interested in Dante and the very ancient types who wrote in other languages. So she became quite skillful in those.
Yeah, she actually went to college and studied medieval literature. Was one of her study fields. So she can just go there and have fun. She took like the hardest things you could take.
Exactly.
Read Middle English.
I don't think they had easy things.
Or Old English, I guess that would be.
For men either, but certainly they expected women not only to be better than, but to actually be twice as good as the men, which you had to be in those days if you were going to get anywhere. But for playwrights, she did not write comedy at all. She wrote a whole bunch of plays, which were very successful at the time, which translated the life of Christ into more modern terms so that people could understand it better. So she's quite versatile in a lot of ways, but she was, from my point of view, most important because she was from the golden age of mystery writing and was a member of the very famous detectives clubs that G.K. Chesterton started, and she was a contemporary of a lot of famous writers, including Agatha Christie. And if you study the two, you'd certainly figure out that Dorothy had more depth than Agatha Christie's writing, which may explain why it's not as popular on another. But the detective club had these things. It was kind of tongue in cheek, but these are the things that they swore they would do as traditional mystery writers. Here's the first one. Do you promise that your detectives shall well and truly detect the crimes presented to them, using those wits which it may please you to bestow upon them, and not placing reliance on, nor making use of, divine revelation, feminine intuition, mumbo-jumbo, jiggery-pokery, coincidence, or act of God?
Can I pause you for just a second?
Certainly.
There are some mystery writers out there that really need to follow that. Go ahead. Sorry. I'm not saying who either.
So they had to swear to that by saying, I do.
Well, how many times have they had to read it to make sure they understood everything it said? Because that's a rather complicated sentence.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know that it's that complicated.
Well,
it's
a lot of parts to it.
The second one that they had to swear to, do you solemnly swear never to conceal a vital clue from the reader?
That's playing fair with mystery.
Exactly. It certainly is. Do you promise to observe a seemly moderation in the use of gangs, conspiracies, death rays, ghosts, hypnotism, trapdoors,
Okay,
Chinamen, super criminals, and lunatics, and utterly and forever to forswear mysterious poisons unknown to science?
Okay,
I
now
love it.
Wait,
let me have a little fun here. This is what they required for the Detectives Club, and I'm going to say, in all honesty, that sounds like a slap at the pulp fiction that was around at that point in time. Like, for example, which one of my favorite heroes, The Shadow. Hypnotism, super criminals.
Well,
Yeah.
this was started in about 1920, so it was a
So-
little before.
Just
what
right
you're
before,
talking about
yeah.
there.
Well, I think The Shadow was out book-wise, but yes. Or if it was coming out close soon.
But it was clearly a slap at a person like Le Fanu,
Oh, yeah.
who had a lot of these kinds of ghosts and weird.
Uh-huh.
And they weren't completely
Stuff.
banned. They were just,
They
They swore to that if they were going to be in this club, and if they abused that, boy, they got kicked out of the club.
Wow. Any other rules they had, or?
No, but those are pretty good rules. It would rule out any kind of ghost story. Any
No,
kind
it's
of thriller.
it's a judicious use. It doesn't say no use.
Well, and when I'm saying ghost story, I'm meaning that it focuses largely on ghosts.
Right.
You could
A
have some
paranormal mystery.
superstitions and this kind of stuff in it, which would not be, I think, a violation of the rule.
I was going to say Murder by Death lampoons a bunch of detective stories and tropes in detective fiction by people who do not follow those rules.
Mhm.
And it's a hilarious movie. If you
It
ever want to
is.
see.
It's one of the best movies.
Yes. Jennifer showed it to me, actually.
Yeah, my mother showed it to me. She pulled that movie out. She actually went out and got it from the library because she remembered loving it. And when Olivia and I turned out to be huge geeks, she's like, I need to show you this movie. I've been waiting for you to get old enough.
Oh,
She did the same thing with The Russians Are Coming, The Russians Are Coming.
Yes, that's silly and cute.
And those are good, like, I think both of those movies, if you know either of those movies, they're both trying to sort of take the teeth out of what, we're talking about popular fiction
Mhm.
in this trends and things that the authors of that creed saw were being overused at the time, and they wanted to write quote-unquote real mystery. Contemporary, I wanted to offer what, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, if this is a bit of a contemporary parallel. If we were getting together for a meeting of the Vampire Writers Club, and we wrote a big treatise about how our vampires will not sparkle, will not whine, and will not attend high school more than once.
People who are more than 100 years younger than you.
Because you're eliminating Buffy when you do that, you know.
I'm just saying she was dating an old man who didn't look frail, but he was old.
He was
Yeah.
what book are you reading from, Fedora?
Yes.
To get that list.
This is her very first one. This is called Whose Body, and it was her first mystery. It came out in 1923. And it apparently was written in 1920 and 1921. And it introduces her most famous character, who is Lord Peter Wimsey, who of course has a whimsical name,
Yes,
doesn't
indeed.
he? But he is a lord who is a kind of a Sherlock Holmes wannabe. He was a spy during World War I, and he still works for MI6 or M6 or whatever they call it. MI6.
Yep.
But because he's the second son, his brother is now the Duke of Denver. And don't ask me why Denver. I'm sure it's something important.
Has nothing to do with Colorado. Sorry,
know.
people.
It doesn't. Anyway, so he's the second son, which means that he had to go into the army or spy brood or something and more or less, make his own way in the world. So he's very clever. He knows a lot about criminalistics and all this kind of stuff, and he knows a whole bunch of languages and is very smart. But all the same, he is cowed by his butler valet fellow named Bunter.
I love these people already.
Yeah, they are. Well, I don't even read you just a little bit if I can find the right page. I'm not sure I can. But it's that he's all Lord Peter is all the time getting his mother to do things for him, and she's pretty clever too, and so he comes by all of it naturally.
Interesting enough, he suffered from shell shock.
He did, and he includes, and this is included in some
common
of
from
this too.
World War One.
Yeah, isn't that where the term originated?
Yes.
Because of the helmets?
Yes.
Yeah, and eventually it would be transformed to PTSD, which we use nowadays.
But it's unusual to include it.
Yep.
Well, on
Is
this
included.
on this one particular occasion, he has told another person things about his mother, that his mother was going to have this big bazaar and everything. His mother knows nothing about it. And he finds out that both that person and his mother are going to be at a luncheon. And so he's desperate to get there and tell his mother what is going on before she makes a mess of what he had said. But Bunter won't let him go out. "Not in those trousers, my lord," said Mr. Bunter, blocking the way to the door with deferential firmness. "Oh, Bunter," pleaded his lordship, "do let me, just this once. You don't know how important it is. Not on any account, my lord. It would be as much as my place is worth. The trousers are all right, Bunter. Not for Lady Swathams, my lord. Besides, your lordship forgets the man that ran against you with a milk can at Salisbury." And Mr. Bunter laid an accusing finger on a slight stain of grease showing across the light cloth. "I wish to God I'd never let you grow into a privileged family retainer, Bunter."
After reading that, I realized I've read that book years ago.
Very probably. So there's a good sense of humor in it, too.
So let's take a look at this. And
Real quick to throw out, just because we're probably not going to touch back on it. In her books also is a character named Harrietvane. And Harrietvane is the author Dorothy Sayers.
Oh.
And oddly enough, and this is the funny and why I bring it up, Harrietvane has many encounters with Lord Whimsy. For obvious reasons. She wanted to meet her own character. He not only that, he helps her in each of the stories of which she appears, and he falls in love with her in each of the stories for which she appears, but she rebuffs him in not the first one, but also the second one, to which then the third one she accepts his advances, and the fourth one they finally hook up and get married. And I will throw out that she was good friends with C.S. Lewis and with J.R.R. Tolkien. C.S. Lewis would have nothing to do with this stuff because he did not like mysteries. However, Tolkien liked the first two, hated the last two.
Like those marriages.
yeah,
So, just to throw that out there.
cool. And she's not the only author to do that, but it's cool to see that started that far back at least. I also say if you ever read Clive Cussler, he always, at least in a lot of his books, he shows up somewhere. It's like, okay, whatever. But anyway, so popular fiction, can it be more? And if not, if it can't be, why not? Well, let me ask this. Let me give the audience a little bit of historical background. I have no idea when this started, nor do I have an idea of when it's actually gotten better, except to say more modern day. But there's always been, and I'm sorry, Chanel, I'm not throwing this at you because I know you're going for your MFA. Love you. But there has always been a cantankerousness between those writers who write popular fiction and those writers who write academic/literary fiction.
I would put those in separate categories. Academic is one arena and literary is another.
Okay. And
Well,
I
maybe
don't
there's
have a problem
three
with
horses in this race, and popular is against both of them.
that. Yeah, I'll go with that. But basically what I'm trying to say is there's the one side's always looked down on the other, and the other one's like, well, we're ones that are earning our money, you not with tenure, and so forth. So that's the short version, and Brad, please feel free to correct me, but or anyone else for that matter. But over the years, more recently, especially in the 21st century, they've been starting to learn from each other. I'm not saying they're coming together yet, but there's some peace laurels out there. May they continue. So, with that, Brad, what have you got to say?
Well, I throw out, so, you've heard me talk about literary before, and I've published literary, and it's, I actually really enjoy literary. But as I famously said before, they are books about nothing, or books about character, books about story. And as I love to say, they are books that people buy but do not read.
That too.
And when you throw that out, I'm not insulting the authors in any way, but typically, literary books tend to be the books that we all hear about. You know, oh my god, you have to read this book. It's so amazing. But then, is it necessarily the most interesting to a wide audience? Maybe not. Whereas your pulpy reads are aimed at a genre, and then at people who like action adventure and stuff like that beyond that. So, you know, the audiences, to be honest, aren't really that different. They're just completely separated from each other in the sense that when I say they're not that different in size. The literary tends to be the highly educated, the, you know, person who is examining the book on all levels and that kind of thing. That's an intellectualism that isn't in everywhere. The same way that people who love superhero movies and action adventure and stuff where the climax is literally somebody getting punched in the face, and that's the, you know, conflict resolution of this story, then, you know, that's another small segment of the population as well. So, to be honest, it amuses me that these two groups hate each other, and I think they hate each other because it goes back to the jocks and nerds, and, you know, the, like, it's really more the, like, upper crusty college people and the nerds, like, you know, like the liberal arts people versus the computer science people. Let's say that. That's probably where this debate really stems out of. So, it's just, to me, it's always been kind of a fascinating one, because there are stories and stuff, but I don't know. Okay, throwing it out as to what literary is.
There's a lot of dovetails.
People are going to hate me on this one, too.
Yeah, as soon as you started talking, we had several dovetails just around the table.
It happens anytime you bring up literary.
I am going to throw this out. This is the order from dovetails, please, and then I'll come back to anybody else who is dovetailing after that. Fedora, George, Melanie, Jen, then to Kathleen.
I hope we make a star shape.
Yeah, it almost is a star shape around the table. Go ahead. Fedora.
Well, I think what Brad has got his finger on is just pure snobism. I don't think necessarily that people who turn their noses up at, say, romance really dislike it. They don't read it. But it's not in their snobbish wheelhouse to have told anybody that they have ever read a romance or a mystery or whatever it is that the current pecking order might be. I think it's just a matter of snobbishness more than anything else.
Probably right.
Okay. And then we're going to George. You're next.
Yes, just to kind of add on what Brad was talking about when he said that there are the genres of books that people buy but don't read. That plays into very much what Robert Downey Jr. said to Gwyneth Paltrow when he was trying to seduce her basically into coming aboard the cast of the first Iron Man that really set up the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe. The line that he said was, "Don't you want to be in a movie that people are going to go see?"
And that does sound like him. And by the way, Chanel, I know I caught you. You're dovetailing after Kathleen. So over to Melanie.
Yeah, the whole not reading thing, I think there are a whole lot of people that read them, but I think, I'm sorry, now I'm dovetailing to George. I actually had a different dovetail, but that takes it in a different direction. Okay. But I think it's actually more honestly, it's the aspirational readers very often are buying it and end up not reading it. Although I think every heavy book reader, unless they're taking in a class to, you know, have to read it for class, ends up buying more books than they actually end up reading, so...
And just to throw out real quick, the reason I said throw that out is strictly from the Goldfinch, which, due to Amazon's numbers, we know for a fact sold very well, hit New York Times bestseller, and was a true success. But in terms of the people who bought it, it ends up being like less than half actually completed it. So that's why I get that and can throw that out with some smidge of a data to back me up.
Yeah, so I have another dovetail, but come back to me at the end.
Okay, over to Jen.
I was gonna highlight that, like, you know, Brad said that he's going to make enemies by what he's saying, but what he's saying is being really snarky and clever about the difference between a book that is going to require thought and a book that's just there to, consume on the airplane or whatever. People own stuff like Ulysses because it looks like you're smart sometimes, but people don't finish Ulysses because it's difficult to read. And that's kind of what separates one from the other. Because it's not that the books are bad or that they're better than other books, it's that the general public is gonna consume something that's written with a little bit more, easily accessible language, or a more rapid pace, or perhaps something that's more applicable to all of my friends are reading it, so I'm gonna read it too so I can talk about it. And literary works are trying to make some sort of a statement and have you, thought-provoking, have you think. You can think during a popular fiction book, which is kind of what this topic is about. But the difference is sort of what you expect from picking up one. You're surprised to find that this popular fiction book has made you think about existential things, but you pick up a literary book expecting to be enlightened or to consider things in a way you hadn't before.
Okay, we'll go Kathleen, Chanel, Melanie, Brad.
Well, it's arguable that when you pick up a speculative fiction book, that you expect to have your mind changed, expanded in some of those same ways. But back to the whole, it's a matter of literary versus popular fiction is somewhat a matter of snobbery. I kind of have to agree in some ways. It's very much one thing is allowed to be considered art and the other thing is not allowed to be considered art. Mm-hmm. And I think that's taking away from everyone in the equation. Literary fiction, plenty of stories can be genre and also literary, like The Handmaid's Tale.
Yep.
That's a sci-fi book. That is a sci-fi dystopia. But, it's literary. Everyone claims it is literary. Margaret Atwood herself is it's literary fiction. It's not genre. Except that it fits the definition. It is. So, I mean, we can talk about how you can only be one or the other, but quite frankly, very often books are both. The best books are both. They have all the benefits of popular fiction, good pacing and a plot that keeps you on your toes and makes you question. And they have characters in the world that make you feel for them and empathize with them and see the world in a different way. And they also have the kind of internally driven issues and character-focused narrative that literary does to me.
Thank you. And you know what? I can't clap loudly because I break everybody's ears out there, but that's thank you, Kathleen.
A golf clap of appreciation.
Yes, only because I respect our listeners' ears as much as I can. Chanel?
Okay.
Here we go.
No. I'm not going in real hard on this.
You just cracked your knuckles, though.
Did I? Oh my god. Okay, so here's the thing. I have had the distinct pleasure of being on each side, looking at the opposite side of this argument. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you with pretty stern certainty that both sides are full of crap.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I would fully agree with that.
There is absolutely no reason. For example, I remember when I was a wee undergrad and trying to go to my fiction writing class and write speculative fiction. And my teacher flat out told me no, because that's not fiction.
Oh, I hate that. I'm sorry.
Definitions work.
That is not.
You're just trying to go. Fiction's a genre too.
We don't write speculative in this class. We don't do genre work in this class.
Yes, I've heard that before too.
Mm-hmm. So it's, and I've also been on this in a very similar class where they were talking about romance novels and escapism. And there was one girl in particular, and I'm not going to say her name, but I could.
Yeah.
I'm not going to.
Call her Audrey.
Oh, she had a very simple looking face, bless her heart.
Whoa!
She was she went through this whole entire argument about how romance novels were terrible and like damning and disruptive to marriage and blah 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 blah, and like how it was unhealthy for women to try to escape using these things. And I'm like, have you ever read a romance novel? And she goes, absolutely not. And I'm just like, go sit down. Please go sit down. You don't get to critique the baby if you haven't had the baby. You don't get to call the baby ugly if you didn't push it out. I'm sorry, you don't. Like so on that note though, I also have to say, backing literary fiction, because clearly I'm the only person here that's going to.
No. I'm about to talk. Keep going.
No, I'm kidding. But like, but in the terms of backing literary fiction, the one thing that I have to say in terms of the majority of genre is that it does have a certain simplicity to it. Mm-hmm. Now, if that's what you're looking for, if you're looking for something to get on the airplane and read and put down when you land, that's great. If you're going into it looking for something that's a bit more complex, that might not be what you find there. And my thing is, I agree with Kathleen, the best is encompassing both worlds, which is what I try to do sometimes, I guess, maybe. But you can't take just one and not learn from the other. I think each side is doing the other a disservice.
Now, once again, golf clapping. And we are continuing Dovetails. It's now Melanie, Brad, myself, Fedora. Go for it.
Okay, this is both something I wanted to say originally and a dovetail to Chanel, so it works out. But I was just in my classes where we read things that were written over 50 years ago and older. Mm-hmm. And by some of them it was much older, like, from Shakespeare and in between the times. English literature and American literature. A lot of what we read when it was written was popular literature. Yes. And today would be genre literature. But the difference is only about, less than 1% of it has survived. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I think some of the very best of genre literature will be considered literary in the future.
So you're like making the canon debate there.
Well, there's a whole lot of issues about what gets into canon and what doesn't. But beyond that, the thing is, what's popular and what's the most popular today isn't necessarily what's going to be considered one of the classics 50 years from now. Mm-hmm. But what's considered a classic 50 years from now, a lot of it is going to be considered genre literature today. Mm-hmm. And in 50 years, it'll be taught and it'll be considered literary highbrow. And students will be amazed when they read it and because they thought it was going to be like Ulysses.
And that's probably going to be Harry Potter.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest. If you're going to pick a book out of the last 20, 30, 40 years that came out that transformed the world and has staying power, it's probably the Potter series.
But the point is, a lot of those books weren't the best sellers in their time. They sold well, usually, but sometimes they weren't the best sellers. Mm-hmm. And we've not heard of some of the very best sellers of that time period.
I don't think Moby Dick sold all that well when it
was
first out.
It's about the story relevance, I think.
Okay, anyway. Brad, over to you, then to me, then to Fedora, and then who's else dovetailing?
Okay, well, to start off, I rip literary all the time. And it's because it comes from love, and it comes from because I can, because I have waded into that world, published books that are truly literary books, and now officially have written the first draft, or finished the first draft of my first literary book. So, having said that, it is something that is a much different beast to write. Mm-hmm. It is, and we've been talking about it. To me, this is where it breaks down. A genre book is going to have moments of literary greatness.
Yes.
Moments where the words are beautiful and the scene is crafted, epically. The character transforms in that moment. We see this. We see these moments in the Marvel movies. We see these moments in good Batman movies. Christopher Nolan. These moments do exist. However, in a literary novel, which can occasionally have good pacing, and occasionally have something exciting happen,
every once in a while, guys.
Exactly.
Don't get excited.
Don't expect it for the
But-
majority.
the majority of that book is going to be an emotional roller coaster that probably rips you up inside, reforms you, and then at the end you are changed for having read that book.
That's what I like. Oh.
Or maybe just depressed.
Well, and maybe that's it. But the point is that it is a transformative journey for the reader.
Mm-hmm.
And in that is what we should hope all authors do, is tell a story that transforms the reader from page 1 to the very final period. And I would love to say that the Iron Chronicles will transform you as you read them. But you know what? It probably isn't. You're probably going to learn some really cool historical facts and have a lot of fun while you're doing it. But the reality is that, you know, in the book that I just wrote, you're going to cry. You're going to, you know, leave tears on the page, and the book will be like a mangled mess by the end of it. And that is something that we should all strive for in every book we write. It's just these things come up, you know, as peaks in, you know, certain books more than others.
Okay, Chanel's saying she's got a very brief one. Did myself, Fedora, Jen.
I was just gonna say, like, I really think that it's possible that literary authors are sadists. It's quite possible, just by virtue of like the emotional manipulation. For example, I totally acknowledge that tendency in myself.
I acknowledge it too.
Kathleen can't say anything. But my thing is, if I leave you wrung out dry like a sponge at the end of the book, I've done my job. If I've made you feel something, I've done my job. If you are a different person coming out of it than you went in, possibly with more holes and, you know, your soul bare to God, then I've done my job.
Excellent. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and put my stuff after Jen. So let's go Fedora, Jen, myself.
Well, I think that Brad is doing something which goes beyond just regular genre, and me too, as we bring in historical details that are true and an attempt to get people to understand where we have come from, which may help us understand where we are, perhaps far better than just being emotionally wrung out. This is
I
true.
agree with that. Of course, I'm always a follower of George Santa Anna anyway. Those who forget their history are doomed to repeat it. So, over to Jen.
I wanted to bring this topic that we were discussing back into to Miss Sayers. That she's the reason we chose this topic to pair with her is because she was trying to take what was considered popular fiction and add these elements of emotional attachment and hole punching and transformation. So and she was criticized for that and told to stop doing it because you're writing fluff stuff. You're writing mystery and you're not allowed to tread those waters. So I just wanted to point out that the argument is still going.
And I'm glad you did. In fact, I'm going to go with myself, Kathleen, then Fedora here. What Kathleen has said, what Chanel has said, and what Brad has said, as well as everyone else, but who has mentioned this along the way, but you guys heard me doing a golf clap on those three on purpose. And that is one of the things in which fiction writing, as far as genre, the pulps, if you will, originally did was they were focused more on plot than they were on character. And in today's taste, as it appears right now, with everything we're getting, the reader's wanting more than just a good plot. They want to see character development. They want to see the character angst, if you will, as they're going through life and changing and so forth, even if it's only a minor change. The old pulps are still going to exist, but if you think about the popular fiction of old days that have now become classics, like just anything Charles Dickens, anything Alexander Dumas, throwing out just two right off the top of my head, Mary Shelley, throwing another one, Bram Stoker. All of that had the elements of both. And as we proceed forward, we have to learn to incorporate and weave and forget this pretentious mess Let those who want to call themselves the industry leaders in both sides of that, be it professors or be it whoever they are on the other side, whatever they want to call themselves. You know what? Don't bother. Just learn from every book you read. Learn from every writer, and the good, the bad, and the ugly. And learn to be able to incorporate both sides of it in there. And with that, Fedora, Kathleen George.
Back to Dorothy L. Her two most critically acclaimed books, and most people think her best, are Gaudy Night and The Nine Tailors. And Gaudy Night is about her time when she was at Oxford. And I mean, that's the setting of it, and tells a lot of very interesting details about what it would be like to be a woman trying to get into a man's world that had been absolutely closed only a very few years before. And the other is Nine Tailors, which it sounds like it's about guys who sew, but in fact it's not. The tailors are bells. And so the story is outlined and sort of encompassed and has weaving in and out of church bells, 9 church bells, which had been there since the 1100s in this little town. And they became characters. These huge bells that would be out of tune, they'd get cracked, they'd have to be recast. They all had names. And of course, you have to have one person doing each of these bells, and it's easy enough to get the coil of rope around your neck and be hanged.
Wow. Kathleen George.
I wanted to say that something else that she did that kind of took her popular fiction, her mysteries, out of just fluff, the fluff zone, was that she examined social issues through characters in her fiction. So I haven't read most of the Lord Peter Wimsey books. But there are characters in there who, one of them was, I believe, a follower of the eugenics movement, which was big at the time. And she took those beliefs to their logical conclusion. And this person was a villain. Like, he was the villain. He killed people. And his whole view of life and the worthiness of some lives over others were part of his motivation for doing what he was doing. Like, he thought he was doing a good thing. So it was fascinating to see how that could play out in just, it's a mystery. It's supposed to be just, fun, but yet I was learning about how they thought about these sorts of things in the 1920s. And I mean, we still read Sayers' work today. She hasn't been forgotten. She's not relegated to fluff. She was doing something good enough that we still appreciate her today. So I mean,
and her command of language is pretty impressive too.
Yes. Oh, and I'm sorry, this is totally sidebar, but like, I love the kinds of characters who will do good things and be like, it wasn't for that. I wasn't doing it to be good. Just leave me alone. I'm a bad person. Like, I'm hard, whatever. So in the time period these books are set, Lord Peter Wimsey, who is a rich man, has what he has called the cattery. And it's basically a business that he runs full of women who are widowed or spinsters. Basically, they would not be able to get good employment elsewhere, if employment at all. So, and they have no men in their lives that can, help support them, which would have been necessary at the time. So he employs all these women. They're like his spies. They're really good at what they do. And like, people don't suspect them because they're women. Who notices women in the 1920s? Like, they're spinsters. They're nothing. But people try and talk to him about how great he's doing that kind of work in the world for these women who really are in need. And he's like, I didn't do it to help them. They're good at their jobs. Stop talking about it. We don't talk about the cattery. So like, there's little things like that I absolutely love. Like, social issues.
Yes, there are a lot of social issues in Dorothy L's books.
Sorry, I love the cattery. I geek out of those women so much.
First rule of a cattery is don't talk about the cattery. No, I'm joking. George, over to you.
I could not tell.
Yeah, we are definitely no stranger to we're no strangers to these sort of limitations that are constantly being imposed by people, like not just in the literary world, but also basically in the whole pop culture world. Mm-hmm. We see it happen a lot when we have singers or actors or anyone like that suddenly find themselves attracted to a specific cause that they want to put the spotlight on, and they're told to shut up and sing, shut up and act and everything. And they're just basically just forced by the general public to kind of stay in their little box. We see that a lot in different movies. Whenever we see a series start to kind of veer away from its consistent rhythm that it had before and try something else, try to do something a little bit different, a little bit off kilter and everything, then the public reacts. We see that a lot. One of the biggest examples that I've seen is in the Friday the 13th series. As soon as New Line Cinema got a hold of the series, they tried something way out of, way off the rails that wound up being one of my personal favorites in the series. But you'll ask the majority of the fans, and they despise that one because it goes so far off of the beaten path that they've been on, despite the fact that beaten path has been going on for 8 movies. They just didn't want this 9th one to be suddenly different. So we see that a lot in basically all forms of pop culture. This is not, this is still something that's happening more and more today.
Totally agree. And yes, go for it, Kathleen.
Oh, are you gonna continue theme, or can I change a bit?
Go for it. We do have technically 9 more minutes, but let's go for it because we're nowhere near the end yet. I feel like we can almost make this a 2-part episode, so I don't plan to, but go for it.
I wanted to bring this back to writing fiction a bit. We've talked a little bit about the ways in which Sayers brought elevated techniques to her mystery series, but how do we use techniques from literary fiction to bring more to our popular fiction? And I ask that because most of us write popular and not all of us write literary. Although, if you'd like to discuss going the opposite direction, Chanel, I saw your face. Please also bring that up.
Let me just jump in and answer, then I'm going to let Brad. I saw you had a dovetail. Chanel, I don't know if you
Chanel wants to go first. You can go first.
Yeah, okay.
Chanel's
I'm going to say point blank. I know everybody around this table has been wanting to throw tomatoes at me, for lack of a better way of saying that, for killing all my story ideas.
I throw onions out. I love tomatoes.
That's fine. Whatever. Well, this entire topic that we have been talking about is why I've killed every single little darling up till now. Because it has not included, as much as I wanted to, it has not included the literary side of it that it needed to. So, just want to do a confession.
All of them could.
They could have, but they didn't. And it wouldn't come out.
Mm.
And with that, bless me, Father, for I have sinned. Moving on. That was my confession. Go ahead.
Jeez. So, okay. All right. So, I am a big, big fan of you write what you read. So, I will find that the best way for me, now, once again, I've said it before, I am a huge parrot. I copy styles fairly easily and techniques pretty well, I'd say. So if I want to introduce an element of literary fiction into the speculative work that I'm working on, then I will immediately go and find the person that I think does it well. Like, for example, this is going to be really random, but in a D.H. Lawrence, Women in Love, I remember being so floored when I read that book because I was like, is he talking about sex here or flowers?
You really were confused.
Are they fireworks? Like, what is he talking about here? And my teacher comes in. There were 4 of us in the class. My teacher comes in. He's like, "It's sex. They're talking about sex," and he was so excited. I'm just like, well, this is awkward. So yeah, and I was just like, I was so floored because it was so hidden. And you had to think, okay, well, a bee and a flower and pollen and, oh, I see what you did there. Ew, you nasty. Like, I had to have that whole discussion with myself in order to see what he did there. And I thought that was the coolest thing. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do that. So for the next story I wrote, I'm like, I'm going to write sex and you don't even know you're reading sex. Yes. And I did it. And I was just like, okay, this was weird. But the point still remains that, like, find someone who does what you want to do and read the shit out of them. Like, read them until you feel their words coming out of your eyeballs. And if you're like me, analyze them. Why are they so effective? Why are they good at what you're trying to get at? Like, is it the use of vocabulary? Is it the use of theme? Is it... And I know that's a very, like, classroom way of approaching reading, but it does help for a lot of people who have brains that work like mine. But yeah, find something you love, read the crap out of it, and try to make it your own.
I think in his case it was fear. He didn't write about those things. And
It was so great though.
in another day.
Okay, Kathleen, and then Brad, if you will, bring us to a close.
I want to highlight how wonderful that technique is for writers learning new tools for their craft. And I want to point out that Chanel did all of those things, and then she set herself a challenge of writing a story that included the technique that she wanted to be able to do herself. So just lessons for future use for all writers, for anything.
Is that Brad?
So you are right, and that is an excellent way of doing that. To put it into a little bit more how I go about it and how a little more classroom structure, I guess. So if an action-adventure story, if a genre story is the knight goes out and slays the dragon with his sword. The literary story is about the knight going on that same journey to slay the dragon, but your focus is not on the dragon. The focus is on the dragon inside the knight that has to be slayed first before he can slay the dragon that is outside. And you know what? The slaying of said dragon may be on the last page of the book that you're going to write, and that's when you're going to get literary. And what I mean by that is, if you really want to focus on telling a greater story, get your plot out there. Work it out. The knight goes to kill the dragon with a sword. That's your plot. Awesome. But then there's so much more that you add into that, and what you're adding in is, you're adding in those great obstacles that need to be overcome. You're adding in those transformative moments so that the knight who starts out and the knight who slays the dragon are two very different people, and that there has been a fundamental shift and change, and how that comes about and how that all kind of works together is how you get a more literary story. I would throw that out that's generally done in moments. In modern storytelling, that is entirely done in moments. Go to any movie you see, and you can count the 10, 15 moments that movie was made on. And then they branched it all together and, kind of made it into a cohesive story. So you can do that too with your stories. But just know that the focus isn't on the plot. The focus is on the plot of the character.
And Jen closes out, and then we're going to close.
I'll close this out by saying that all that Brad just said is true, and that as you're writing, sometimes you're not doing, those things don't happen in your conscious brain.
True.
Like, I'm a firm believer in like the collective subconscious. Like, we all have the story already inside of us, and we're writing it down, and sometimes you stumble across a moment where you realize, holy crap, I've been writing a coming-of-age story this whole time. You didn't realize it, because the story is already alive and completed somewhere inside you, and it's coming out. You may not start your dragon story knowing that it's going to be the dragon was the friends we met along the way. Well, you start your story writing a dragon story, and about 3/4 of the way through you say, oh my gosh, he has father issues. And then you go back and look and see that you've laid the breadcrumbs for that the entire time and didn't quite realize it. Not until you finished your first draft did you realize that you had a layer that you can now massage out and strengthen. And that's the value of second and third and sometimes fifth or sixth drafts, is that you understand your characters, you understand your pacing, but sometimes you gotta get that surface dragon quest out first.
Yep.
And then he can slay his dad.
Add in your layers.
And with that, Thank you for listening, and I do want to thank all the people who are listening around the world, and for all the comments we've recently been getting, telling us, like, for example, that we're part of your writing community, that we've been restarting your writing, and so forth. Please subscribe to us wherever you are listening to us at. Please like our Facebook page, follow us on Twitter, wherever your social media is. Have a great one. See you next week. Have a great time writing. Thank you. The new theme songs for Right Pack Radio were written and performed by Meredith Tate. All copyrights remain with her. Writers.